Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, January 27th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the state of New York and how the Democrats on the national level from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee are advising that the New York State delegation in the legislature and the Senate pass a new congressional map that gives the Democratic Party, in a traditional type of year, 23 out of the 26 total number of congressional districts in the next 10-year map that is expected to be passed. And this advising from the National Democrats is more of an effort, I would say, from Democrats to gerrymander the state of New York as one of the most populous Democratic states where they have a very real opportunity at doing so. And considering the fact that the process itself for redistricting is nearly over, the Democrats are looking for last-minute victories that they can have, and they are trying to counteract what they expected to be a very bad year for the process itself against them in this new map. But here's the thing. The Democrats are going to gerrymander New York. It's just a question about how they are going to do it. The fact that the National Democratic Party is asking for the state of New York to effectively underrepresent Republican votes in the state of New York is actually quite concerning. And it is very bad to see just because it reduces the amount of representation that we see in the state of New York. But nonetheless, it looks like something that is going to pass. The same way that we saw Republicans ask and did receive a gerrymander in states such as Ohio, and Democrats did the same exact thing in the state of Illinois. Now, gerrymanders don't exactly go as far as what you see on the national map, and I say this in reference to the state of Illinois, which passed a gerrymander that is as aggressive, if not maybe slightly less, but as equal to aggressive as what the Democrats are expecting to see from the state of New York. But in the state of Illinois, what the Democratic Party drew was a map in which there are a total of 17 congressional districts, and the Democrats win 14 of them in a normal type of year. What you find is that the only competitive district here is the 17th district, which has a partisan lean of Democrat +4 relative to the national numbers, which means that in the 2020 election, if this district was there, it would have voted for the Democratic candidate by 9 percentage points, considering that Joe Biden won the popular vote by 5 points. So seeing the partisan lean here already so lopsided in favor of the Democratic Party, this is truly the only district that the GOP in a normal year will even be competitive in, and beyond that, the Democrats are pretty much safe and secure in every single one of the rest of them. And that's because they cracked Chicago. They took a city with a very large population and drew in rural areas in an effort to ensure that every single one of these districts, besides the big three here that are in red, will go to the Democratic Party. And what you find in these three districts are that Democrats aren't going to do well. The Republicans are ahead by substantial amounts, 26, 42, and 46, which means that they aren't winnable for Democrats, but that's the way they drew them on purpose. They kept all the Republican votes together to ensure that Republicans would lose seats no matter what happens in the next election. Because taking a look at the previous Illinois map, what you found is that there were 5 solid Republican seats, Republican +8 being the smallest one, and then an additional 2 competitive seats that had Republican leans. Republican +3 and Republican +5, now both of which have turned into a solid Democratic seat, Democrat +7, again relative to the national numbers, so more like Democrat +10 to 12, and then Democrat +4. So you have seen these districts turn in a very heavy way towards the Democratic Party. But if this gerrymander wasn't enough for you to see how unfair this map actually is and how much the Democratic Party really advanced their majority in the state of Illinois when it comes down to the congressional delegation, the National Democrats asked that a map of 15-2 be proposed and passed. They thought that the 14-3 was not extreme enough, and they asked that the Illinois Democratic Party, in fact, went on their own accord to submit a draft congressional map that the state legislature could then vote on and send to the governor there. They decided to put forth a map that was a 15-2 advantage for the Democratic Party, meaning that instead of Republicans getting 3 seats, they would get 2, routinely. 2 congressional districts in the state of Illinois. So the Democrats on the national level don't always get their way. So when we see a memo like this from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, we know that this is what they are reaching for, but we don't see this from the state of New York itself. But there are a lot of signs, I would say, that show that the state of New York is undoubtedly going to receive a gerrymander in favor of the Democratic Party. In fact, the governor of the state of New York, Kathy Hochul, was victim to gerrymandering, went from a swing district into a district she could no longer run in, so it doesn't look like she's going to be one to very easily veto a map that doesn't end up, putting her party ahead. I think that, or veto a map that puts her party a little too far ahead. I honestly don't think that will be a concern for Democrats, that this won't make it past the governor's desk. But even though the National Democrats might be calling on this, this doesn't mean that this is going to pass. The same way that Illinois didn't put forth a 15-2 map simply because the National Democrats had asked. But after seeing maps besides Illinois, but seeing maps on the GOP side, such as North Carolina and Ohio, Democrats have begun to become a lot more aggressive, especially when it comes down to court cases, because now they know that they can reject maps and can get Republicans on their side. The state of Ohio has a majority Republican delegation in the Supreme Court, yet they shot down a GOP gerrymander. There were 2 Trump-appointed justices along with another Republican-appointed justice in the state of Alabama, and they actually shot down this brand new map that was passed by the state of Alabama, and that map was underrepresenting Democratic Party vote share when it came down to the state. And the state of Alabama court said, no, you cannot use this, and now they have to draw a new one. So things that are happening in Ohio and Alabama are a response to a lot of these anti-gerrymandering efforts that the Democratic Party is putting forth, and it is very hypocritical to pass a new type of congressional map. But I honestly don't think that the Democratic Party cares. They see maps such as North Carolina, where Democrats won the majority of the House vote in 2020 in the state of North Carolina, yet will only receive 3 congressional districts in the next election under this map. 3 out of 14, despite them winning the majority. And in the old map, they only won 5 out of 13, despite, again, winning the majority of the vote from the state of North Carolina. So they're taking this one to court, and they're trying to shoot it down, but if it is to be upheld, this will truly be an extremely aggressive GOP gerrymander that benefits one political party that isn't the Democratic Party. So when you see things like this, with the New York memo and the push out from the National Democrats to gerrymander the state, it's not simply because they just want to gerrymander. This is a pushback on what they seem to be accusing of an attack on their representation. So they're trying to fight fire with fire. I'm not justifying it in a way that says this is good, but it's simple politicking. When you see a map like Illinois, Ohio responds. When you see a map like North Carolina, New York is expected to respond. When you see maps, that are no longer favorable to you like they once were because the partisan control has flipped, and when you see certain, swing races drawn out, such as Arkansas, that 2nd congressional district, or Oklahoma's 5th congressional district, or Utah's 4th congressional district, what you find is that Democrats are now limited in their opportunities, so they have to make it up elsewhere. And they do so very, very aggressively. This started out in the state of Oregon. I would say that the Democrats really passed their first congressional map that was, in fact, a gerrymander, and it was this state that typically has 2 competitive districts. You have 2 safe Democratic districts, and then you have 2 competitive districts, a Democrat plus 4 district and a Republican plus 1 district, and a solid GOP district. What this new map did was made the 2 safe districts the same, kept a safe Republican district, and then made 2 solid, not super solid, but solid Democratic districts, meaning in a normal type of year, Democrats are winning here potentially by double digits, especially with an incumbent, and use that new open race to ensure a new Democratic district was created, and then adding to the 5th district that no longer has a partisan lean. So what they did was gerrymander the state of Oregon, and from then it was just moving on to state after state after state after state, where partisan control overcame the idea of an independent commission, overcame the idea of a fair process, and what that happened and what that ended up with was gerrymandering across a number of these states. So New York very well could follow through. And if you're wondering, is this possible? I mean, looking at the election results in the state of New York, one might say, no, it isn't possible. Joe Biden only won 61% of the vote. How do you get it to a point where Democrats are winning 23, out of the 26 votes? That's effectively 88% in terms of representation. But I can promise you, it absolutely can happen. And we have maps, many maps, that propose a very similar type of ideal. This is the map that I'm showing you with the 2016 election numbers. This is simply from someone who decided to use DRA to draw a 23-3 map. And they do so by putting 2 Republican districts in upstate New York and 1 in the southern region. Not necessarily, New York City, but this is a region, I believe, that is Long Island grouping in there, combining in other parts. And then it works around to make that first district a Democratic district. But this is actually 2016 presidential numbers. Joe Biden did better than Hillary Clinton by a pretty substantial amount. And this would be 2020 numbers. What you find is that the Democratic Party performs a lot better. And even in 2016 numbers, where Donald Trump was winning on the national average, Republicans won the popular vote in the House of Representatives, Republicans won control of the United States Senate. Even under that map, what you find is that Democrats still are able to maintain the 23-3 delegation, which is a sign that if Democrats do pass a map similar to the one on your screen right now, that it can hold up and that it is absolutely possible. And if you wonder how we got here, gerrymandering has always been a thing. What we have seen so far is that both parties are very willing to go extremely aggressive when it comes down to these brand new maps. What they are doing is ensuring that the opposition party does not get as much representation as they deserve. And obviously that is something that should not be happening, but it is a reality in our American political system, and I'm going to cover it as much as I can because it is super important to look at. One thing that I do want to say is that gerrymandering didn't end up benefiting the GOP as much as I personally expected. And that's because Democrats are doing things like this. That's because Democrats are turning to states like New York and gerrymandering them into oblivion to counteract years of being down against the GOP, because Democrats didn't control the process in 2010 and they did not control the process in 2020. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But in looking at this new map, what you will find is that Democrats and Republicans are effectively neck and neck. In the states, across all of the ones that have been confirmed and single district states, you will find that in this new map, there are 101 solid Democratic seats and 29 competitive Democratic seats. On the Republican side, there are 106 solid Republican seats and 21 competitive Republican seats, leaving just 21 highly competitive seats with 157 districts yet to be withdrawn. Democrats and Republicans are neck and neck, 130 to 127. The GOP should have the technical advantage in terms of overall representation by the end, because Louisiana is out, Alabama is out, Tennessee is out, Missouri, Kansas, Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, but Democrats could counteract that. Potentially in Minnesota, that's a question because it's up in the air. New York, definitely. They will jump up after that New York map passes. Potentially Pennsylvania. Democrats have the majority there in the courts, and the courts have to pick a new map. Connecticut and Rhode Island are probably going to be solid, and New York is going to be, New Hampshire is going to be 1-1 simply because Republicans now control the process, but can't draw two Republican districts. So, in looking at this process, you would say that Democrats and Republicans probably started out a bit even, but they didn't. And here's the map that proved it. Looking at the process and the redistricting cycle that I mentioned to you before the process had officially begun, we knew the GOP had a significant upper hand on the Democrats when it came down to this process. They had over 100 electoral votes more, or nearly 100 more congressional districts to reappropriate and redraw than the Democratic Party, meaning they should have had a significant advantage over Democrats by the near end of this process, as we are in right now. And if I was to just characterize it so you can actually visualize this, what you will find is that Democrats didn't exactly control that many states. And in the states that they do control, they went extremely aggressive in order to ensure that they were not going to be outpaced by the GOP. In this map, you will find that on this new electoral map, there are 91 electoral votes for Democrats. You have to detract 2, counting every single state, multiply that by 2, and remove that from the total number of electoral votes, and that is the total number of congressional districts that Democrats are able to fully draw on their own, just off of a total control process. Looking at the Republican states, they have some pretty populous states, and some very important ones for Democrats and Republicans alike. Looking at this map, what you will find is that already off the bat, Democrats are behind the Republicans when it comes down to the new drawing process. And taking a look at all of the states that they control, the Republicans control 222 electoral votes worth in terms of the process itself, and Democrats control just 91. I mean, you are effectively talking about a significant portion of the population that has more Republican drawn districts than Democrats do. And yet somehow we end up in a map where Democrats and Republicans are neck and neck, and Democrats could actually end up benefiting after this process. Despite, again, the GOP being ahead by such a substantial amount in terms of the new process that has just gone through, the redistricting process that has been put forth and passed in many of these red states, Republicans did not go as harsh as they were expecting, but Democrats absolutely did. And Democrats have the luxury that in some of the states that are very populous, that they have control of an independent commission. For instance, Washington and California, Republicans aren't going to have as much of a say as they might if they were to control the states, for obvious reason, and Democrats wouldn't either. But in the state of California, Democrats ended up lucking out tremendously. Every single district with the Democratic incumbent has gone to Biden by 10 points or more in terms of the last election. And in the state of Washington, Democrats seem to be favored. Those are 2 states with independent commissions, but Democrats actually ended up lucking out. Democrats also lucked out in the state of Virginia. It seems, at least. They will luck out in the state of Virginia. They seem to have lucked out in the state of Arizona, which could have been drawn in a much more consequential way. Democrats don't control anything there. And the fact that the map is now in a way that more fairly represents the state than any other type of map that was proposed, that's arguably a good thing for the Democratic Party, considering that the GOP could very well have drawn it in a worse way. But they didn't have the capability. State of Colorado, Democrats didn't exactly enjoy too much of that map, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Again, a GOP gerrymander would be, of course, much worse for the Democratic Party than anything a map from an independent commission could draw. But my point is that the Republican Party started out with a tremendous advantage in this process, yet fell flat on their face when it came down to the finalization. Democrats, however, counteracted this with maps like the one we are expecting to see in the state of New York. They took gerrymandering to another level, and while Democrats are very big to criticize this, they also did propose a bill, and that bill ended up failing in the United States Senate. I think by the time we reach the next time that this bill is proposed, Republicans might actually cross over for it, simply because Democrats were extremely aggressive in this process. Republicans and Democrats, I would say, about equal in terms of the gerrymandering from what I've seen so far. I've seen some excessive GOP gerrymanders that have been shot down now simply because of how aggressive they are. I've seen some extremely aggressive GOP gerrymander proposals, like the one in Florida from Governor Ron DeSantis. But those are just proposals, and the maps that have passed in Ohio and Alabama are no more and are being forcibly redrawn by court systems there. So we will see if Democrats actually get the upper hand, despite starting out with a significant disadvantage against the GOP, which ultimately ended up with them being about even by the end of this process altogether. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.